Okay. Given the appropriate pause to allow people to come into the room here. Thank you. First of all, to start, FPSA. Thank you for allowing us to have this conversation today. It's exciting to be able to talk about sustainability and the impact it has in the processing industry. And I've got two wonderful guests here. Kicking things off here, a lot of attention goes to Scope 3 emissions and the food and beverage world because it's big, right? It's the big sustainability impact that people talk about, but it's hard. It's also not directly in your control sometimes. So we're going to talk about impact that is controllable and how it's also valuable for processing. We're going to hit things like, the energy and water use and wastewater use and all things like that, and how it actually can drive value. And we're going to talk about how you can turn that into a story that actually makes sense and allows you to move your sustainability efforts forward. Uh, who am I? I'm Sheldon Young. I work at Alpha Laval. I am a process optimization sustainability specialist. That means I work with our clients to understand their goals, and then I help make it happen, make it real with the wonderful equipment that we have here at Alpha Laval. And I've got two fantastic people joining. I've got Brad Munchell and Jennifer Brentano. I'm going to let them introduce themselves, and we're going to kick this conversation off. Jennifer, why don't you go first?
Yep. Thanks, Sheldon. I'm Jennifer Brentano. I am Director of Manufacturing Sustainability for Dairy Farmers of America. I work with all of our manufacturing plants. We have 82 manufacturing plants across the United States, and I work with them on their reporting, working to set goals for sustainability, and working on bringing vendors that can help us with those goals. So I've been with DFA for just under 11 years, starting with kind of a quality assurance, regulatory role, project management, lots of manufacturing years under my belt. So I'm glad to be here today. Thanks for having me, Sheldon.
Absolutely, my pleasure. Brad.
Yeah, thanks, Sheldon. Thanks, FPSA. I'm Brad Munchell, engineering manager for Rotom Smart Sanitary Solutions. Rotom is first and foremost a distributor of sanitary equipment, pumps, valves, heat exchangers, instrumentation. But then we also have our Sani Smart Solutions team that handles project work. So we'll do process design, engineering services all the way through sanitary installation with equipment setting and 316 welding. I've been with Rotom 5 years. Before my time at Rotom, my entire career was direct manufacturing in plants or corporate engineering groups. So I've been in operations, I've been in engineering, and most of my previous companies have given me a nice blend of maybe running processes as well as capital projects and trying to justify the ROI of things that obviously has a sustainability leg to it as well. So thanks for having me.
Absolutely, absolutely. All right, let's kick things off. Jennifer, let's start with a question for you. You work with a lot of facilities at DFA. What are the things and kinds of impacts that you're focused on when it comes to sustainability?
Yeah, we spend a lot of time working with them on really getting efficient. So sometimes in the last few years, the word sustainability can be a little bit off-putting to operations. They think of it as that's not my thing, that's your thing, or like we don't have time for that right now. But if you frame it with them as efficiency and saving
Yeah.
money and optimization of their processes, that's different. They do that every day, right? They look at those things every single day. They're always looking for ways to save water, reduce their energy load, to save money on utilities, huge expenses, right, that the plants have. Depending on the location, most of the plants are really sensitive about water. Some of them are in really big water stressed zones, right? Colorado, New Mexico, as an example, and are very tuned into what their cities are doing and how they're using those resources. So and if you frame it like that with them, that's how you can get there. That's how we can get their focus and attention on the project.
Yeah, and the process that you use with them, how do they kind of hone in on the things that matter the most to them? Is it simply by the big cost items, or is there another process you use?
As far as projects for sustainability,
Yeah, yeah, in terms of like where you focus, yeah.
we have a reporting platform that we've built that all the plants input all of their data for our carbon emission reporting. And so communicating with them on, how they're doing with that, and then what opportunities we know about that might affect those buckets, right? We look at, especially their emissions per pounds produced or tons produced depending on the plant or gallons produced depending on the plant, and how they might lower those numbers really is the focus.
Yeah, I really like that. You have a relative metric there, one that is
Mhm.
relative to the production, because that lets you look across facilities and have a baseline. So that's a really interesting takeaway, at least from understanding the impact of, of making sustainable choices, a way to look at it horizontally across your different operations. Absolutely. Brad, I'm going to jump to you here. In your role, I know you're talking to many different types of projects and customers. And to Jen's point, sustainability is one of those words that can mean so many different things. What does it sound like to you what does sustainability sound like when you're talking to?
Yeah, absolutely. And kind of listening to Jen talk, I smile because it sounds like anything but sustainability for those individuals that might have other priorities. Somebody could say they need to optimize their cleaning because it's taking too long. Maybe they have a heat exchanger that doesn't have the lifetime it used to before cleanings, and they need to try to get that back to where it started 5 years ago or 8 years ago. Or even generally, hey, we need to add more throughput. We need to add another production line. And those are times when we get to engage and say, how do you do it now? And let's talk about, how you can do it in the future, since you're starting kind of with a level playing field, with a new production facility. So, but regardless, they're talking about saving dollars. They're talking about gaining throughput. They're not saying I need to be more sustainable. And as you said, Sheldon, we work with a blend of end users. It could be a process engineer, it could be a maintenance manager, it could be a corporate engineer. So it sounds differently from each one of those, and what their primary role may be is the angle they're taking. But it rarely comes out and says, "Hey, we need to be more sustainable. Will you help us?"
Yeah, it's when I have dialogue with organizations as well. It's like I always try to remind them, sustainability, productivity, profitability. Those three things have to be connected and are connected, right? If you move the lever correctly, you'll impact those by doing that. So
Yeah.
good. All
I
right,
was
I
going
want
to
to
say
move,
real quick, Sheldon, too.
please.
My background, I've worked with several European-based companies, and I know we've had
Mhm.
this dialogue in the last few weeks that they're not afraid to lead the discussion with setting sustainability goals, and large
Yeah,
American companies are too. But
yeah.
again, in the plants and at that level, it rarely leads with that. But it is kind of nice to see when you have companies that do put that out there and know that needs to be involved on all levels of what they're doing. So.
Yeah, for sure. You see it. A lot of companies will have these goals, but to Jennifer's point, it's like how do you make them real, right? And how do you turn them into real impact? And so we'll get into that a little bit as we talk. I want to talk about one big thing that happens, and I know Jennifer, this is important to to dairy, but it's any food processor is to deal with cleaning, right?
Mhm.
It's it's a necessary thing we all have to deal with. It costs a lot of water, it costs a lot of heat and energy, chemicals, it creates a lot of wastewater, and it takes the value of time, right? Because if
Mhm.
you are cleaning, you aren't producing. So I'll Jennifer, I'll start with you on this one. How should a processor start to think about making a dent in the cleaning impact?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I come from quality, a decade plus in quality assurance. And so food safety and sanitation are things that I know very well. And sometimes the mentality can be, you know, we have nothing can change with how we're doing it because it might mess it up. I don't know if that
Mhm.
makes sense. Like
Oh, it
the
does.
temperatures that we're using, the chemicals that we're using, how much, the time we're taking, that we're doing that. And when you travel to our plants, each of them have had something that's happened, right, where they've turned up the heat or, added more chemical because something happened at some point to cause them to maybe overreact a little bit with something. And getting them to make that change is a pretty difficult thing. And so really bringing in experts like you or like Brad, right, that can, talk to the right people in the right way, because like I'll guarantee someone has said you will do this way to make sure we don't have that outcome again, right? And so and that's ingrained, and getting past that can be very, very difficult, and figuring out the right conversation to have, and way to present things to change that is really the key. I don't know. I hope that makes sense.
No, it does. Again, it's I can't tell me how many times I've heard people say it's the secret sauce, right? Don't mess with the secret sauce in terms of cleaning. But you're 100% right. I know the way that I've approached, and Brad, I'll let you speak to it now, is it's through, what can we change little by little and understand the impact. So, Brad, why don't you speak to your experience
Jennifer,
with that?
I feel exactly what you were saying from my past lives, but cleaning is always that delicate one. It's a huge opportunity, but
Mm-hmm.
you've got your sustainability arm that's led by your EH&S group, and then you've got your food safety, which is led by quality. So as a process engineer, I usually like to step back and just watch those two duke it out and see how it lands. But it's when you do have to clean, it comes down to validate, like Jennifer was saying, trying to
Hmm.
validate that. And every plant's different. Every product you run is different, night shift versus day shift. So you're not gonna reduce your variability to zero, but you do have to kind of understand that range that you can play in, and set your times to where you're comfortable, you're covered, but you're not wasting water either. So that is a very challenging one that have a lot of people involved, whether it's visual appearance, sensory, ATP swabbing, after you're cleaning, however organizations have to verify that, making sure you understand that and are looking at that every year, looking at that when things change. But I also like to go back and say, avoid wet cleaning if you can. And there's a couple ways you can do that, and it may not apply to every company and every product you're making, but product wheels, especially when spray drying. And Jennifer, I know you alluded to this before our chat. Running your least sensory products first. Religious concerns, allergens come into play with that too. But if you have a product wheel where you can bucket 3 or 4 products together without a wet clean, that's a huge opportunity for organizations, not just with throughput, but with all the water and chemicals and heat that we've talked about as well. Um, and then another option is pigging. And Sheldon, I know you and I have chatted that in the past. If you're able to pig through process lines, and usually we see it for high viscous materials,
Yeah.
but it helps with
Can you
yield.
explain what pigging is before we move on, just so
Pigging, you
people
basically
understand what pigging
basically
is?
have you typically a plastic insert that scrapes the walls of the tube or the pipeline that you're processing materials through. And you usually think it when you've got a very long distance pipe, or maybe even a high viscous stuff that is hard to clean. But try to physically remove all that with compressed air or water behind it. And then your soil load goes way down, so that when you do have to wet clean, you've
Right.
got far less soils that you've got to get off the walls and get out of the pipe as a part of your
Mhm.
cleaning. So
And it lets you recover the product that's in the pipe as well, right?
it does. So it improves yield, and then hopefully reduces your water. Now, pigging systems can be expensive, but again, when you got to run the numbers, and I think we're going to get
Hmm.
into that later, but they definitely make sense in certain applications. So, but yeah, coming back to knowing your cleaning, validating that, and looking at your CIP systems of low hanging fruit. We haven't talked CIP return, but if you're an organization with CIP systems that are not returning your CIP fluid, giant means, and Jen's
Yeah.
alluded to water scarcity, and people think, oh, you care a lot about water, but again, you've said it, Sheldon, the heat, the chemicals,
It's the
the
energy. Yeah.
the discharge of that water is usually a giant cost for organizations on the wastewater side. So when you are able to recycle that within your process and within your equipment that you're cleaning, but then even outside of that, that if you can take your final rinse, which should be fairly clean with chemicals, and make that your pre-rinse for the next piece of equipment that you have to clean with it, there's a lot of opportunity on CIP return and CIP recycle around your systems that you need to make sure you're looking at and doing properly.
Yeah, and I think we'll get into technology in a little bit here, but it's like, combining that with like smart technologies within your and the way you clean can all add up to big impact. And the numbers, you think, oh, it's just a valve or it's just a tank I'm cleaning. You start doing it dozens of times every week and you start adding the numbers up, and wow, that's a lot more than I thought it was, right?
Absolutely.
Speaking of numbers, we're going to talk about quantifying and justifying next. So in my experience, organizations will take on a sustainability related project if, one, they're required to, like government says you have to do this, right? Two, it aligns with goals and targets that have been set. And three, I think we alluded to this as well, it makes business sense, right?
Mhm.
Those are the three things that I kind of pegged. I welcome you to add more. I'll start with Jennifer. I'll come back to you on this one. How do you go about, and you alluded to this a little bit in your earlier remarks, go about quantifying that impact and creating kind of a business value and business case on justifying a sustainability related project?
Yeah, yeah. So all of our plants have an operating budget, a set amount of capital they can spend on R&M, repairs and maintenance, right, every year. And then anything above that has to be approved by our farmers, right?
Oh,
It's a cooperative, right? And so the farmers approve all decisions made for capital spend at the plants. And so we really have to have a clear business case on any request that's made with a target ROI. And so for things like sustainability to move forward, we have really tried to work hard to build systems where we can look for maybe potential grant money, right? Or
hmm
the energy companies often have some rebate things that we can look at. We've established just in the last 6 months a partnership with a group that helps research grants for all of our plants and can help write them, right? Because that's a resource that the plants don't have. They don't have people that can write grants just sitting around, right? And so finding people that can, help us leverage and find opportunities for all of our plants and have those available. Training grants are out there. Like there's all kinds of opportunities that we've been missing out on because we didn't have anyone to leverage to go, one, look for them, and two, help us apply for them. There's just not enough across 82 plants. There's not enough, people to do that. And so, if we can lower the cost of projects and get training dollars covered for that new equipment, then it makes that ROI easier to make sense for the business.
Yeah. Have there been any kind of like, I guess, memorable projects that you've been able to work on that um, kind of really demonstrated the value of sustainability to someone?
Yeah, and we won a grant to with a partnership with another vendor to implement a dairy AI program in some
Oh,
of our.
interesting.
It's taken a lot of work to get it implemented. Even talking about AI in manufacturing, they're very controlled about their control systems and changes that might be made without their knowledge and making sure their processes stay sound. But we're already seeing results from that, and so but it wouldn't have happened, right, if we hadn't had some matching money and input from that vendor to help get that through.
Yeah. And I'm going to ask you a question that isn't on my little list here, but it's tied to all this. When you have stakeholders that have to kind of give the nod to these kinds of projects, can you talk about the different types of stakeholders that have to be at the table to really drive this forward?
Yeah. Even to get conversations about these projects going, you really have to have operations leadership and engineering leadership engaged and already bought into goals. That's something that when I came into this position, um, we have a separate group that's working on farm sustainability, whole separate thing, and there's a lot of money available for them to use with farm projects and for farmers to engage with. Not so much in the manufacturing and space um, from a quantity perspective. And so, getting those leaders engaged, we are forming a new council this year where all of those leaders, including finance, will meet regularly to talk about different vendors like Alpha Laval and different companies that have brought us some ideas. I have a whole list of vendors that have come to me wanting to engage on different things, but I can't do that without them, right? Like
Right.
I can't pick out which plants that would be best useful for across 82 sites without that team. And so it's a chance for us to get together to review all the numbers together, right? And talk about the goals together. And it has to be a partnership in manufacturing. It can't be me talking at them or even our CEO, agreeing to something. without them, because they're the ticket. They're the ones that make all the decisions, decide what projects can go forward, even know which plants are the right ones to engage with on different projects. Because we run everything from fluid milk bottling to ice cream to, as you mentioned, powdered products, cultured products, a wide variety of plants across the U.S. And every plant is different. Every plant's operating in a different environment. Every plant's in a different state of, they're different shape. Maybe, some are only a few years old. Some are over 100 years old, right?
Yeah.
That, the envelope may not be the same in all of those spaces.
Yeah, I'm really glad I asked that question because I think to me it's a huge takeaway for people that are trying to get things done. It's like having those right stakeholders and knowing that their input's going to matter, and just being able to, that committee idea was fantastic. I think that's a great takeaway for folks. So thanks for answering that. Brad, I want to jump to you. A similar question around this, just around when you're working with your clients, how do you help them quantify and make a business case on a sustainability focused project, or even like making sustainability part of their decision process to help move projects forward?
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, from the ROI standpoint, right, a project cost is what Rotom does a lot in our Sandy Smart Solutions. But when it comes down to utility costs and what a gallon or CCFF of water costs each plant, you got to start with your knowns and your rates, your instantaneous consumptions of equipment, how many systems you have, and then you start looking at variables and assumptions of how often, how many days a week do we run this system, what's the annual volume, and you just kind of got to build a tool, whether it's a spreadsheet or some other means that doing simple math to understand the impact certain savings could make. But back to our comment earlier about a brownfield, maybe where somebody's adding in a new production line. Maybe they have flow panels now, and it's not a company or not a facility that uses mixed proof valve groups, not a facility that maybe they have heat exchangers handling juices and high fiber contents, that maybe a certain wide gap technology from Alpha could help extend the life of a heat exchanger from maybe 8 hours out to 16 hours or 24 hours. So as we're talking about those things, there is new technology that vendors come up with all the time that we're able to say, okay, I understand from a spare parts standpoint, you might want to keep what you have, but from an efficiency and a sustainability standpoint, are you open to exploring some of those? So Rotom's typically trying to have those conversations and be a good steward for our customers to make sure that they've explored those avenues. Yes, those increase your capital cost, but they also increase the justification for the project. And I was going to kind of ask Jen a little bit too, as she was talking, working for multiple companies and seeing this. I've seen people and organizations be successful when they're not stuck to a capital budget that is, this project is $250,000. Well, if you made it 400,000, the justification may expand. And when individuals feel that freedom to explore those avenues is one thing. We also see companies that we can't afford that. I'm sorry, we're just going to have to be stuck to this scope. And that gets frustrating both with Rotom, and also got frustrating in my past lives of feeling like, there was a better solution out there, but people were afraid to explore it. So I would just kind of challenge all my customers to turn those stones over and evaluate it. It sounds like DFA kind of follows that mold too. They still have the approval at the end, but don't hold anything back early on in the process.
Yeah, it really depends on the project, and usually we're working against a timeline is the issue, and budget. Obviously, I came from capital project management, so and the things have changed in the last, I would say, 5 years, and you didn't go a penny over what was approved, but now some things have changed where if you can justify something is better or will decrease the cost of the operating costs overall, but you better come with your data and the facts to have that conversation.
Yeah, for sure. Brad, you started down the road here on technology. It's always changing. I think you can't go a month or so without some new thing coming out to help drive value and impact, right? So how has sustainability influence innovation from what you've seen in the projects that you develop? So you can give examples, whatever worked for you, and talk
Yeah.
about that.
So I mentioned the wide gap technology
Yeah.
is one thing on plate and frame heat exchangers, and making sure I'm trying to eliminate buildup and extend the life of a runtime. Again, for certain products, juices, something higher in fiber,
Sure.
higher in particulates. Mixed-proof valves as well are always evolving, and we work with a lot of facilities that don't use mixed-proof technology, but we
Yeah.
work with a lot that do. And I think Alpha's got the burst clean on there, where they built the control top of the valve to be able to clean effectively in short amount of time, where you're not letting the PLC control that and might turn, valve cleaning into lifting the seat 3 or 4 or 5 quick times, fractional seconds, versus a 5 second and then another 5 second and another 5 second. And I think we're going to get to this later too, but I know somebody's thinking, what's 4 seconds going to cost you? But across a 40 valve group, 3 cleanings a day, and maybe 4 or 5 valve groups in a facility, you'd be amazed at how those seconds add up and how that water adds up. So,
Yeah. Yeah, for
which
sure.
comes back to that tool of having the ability to, state your assumptions, as Jen said, come with the data. Have a tool where you know your knowns and you state your assumptions, and it's simple math from there. So,
Yeah. And Jennifer, when it comes to, you're a busy person, keeping up on all the technology that's out there. So how do you keep yourself informed around what's available to you to make those impacts you're looking to make?
I'm involved in several working groups, industry working groups. So in dairy, we've got, IDFA has a committee that does a great job introducing new technology and vendors. The U.S. Dairy Council also has a group that we meet quarterly on different things. So there's a water group, there's a emissions group, there's a circularity group, and then there's more of a policy group. And so we connect together with other leaders in dairy and really stay connected on, kind of what people are doing out there as far as technology, as far as, what kind of projects should we be looking at to help, guide dairy overall. A lot of that focus right now has been on some of these packaging regulations that have been coming, but the conversations are kind of guided by what's happening in the space.
Very good.
Mm-hmm.
Actually, I'll stay with you on this next question around justifying. We talked a little bit about the metrics and getting the right people around the table. Does sustainability itself, I'm risking we're asking this question, does sustainability itself have a value on the evaluation sheet when you're just trying to decide on a project? Is it like we're doing this, to make an impact towards these goals, but it's really focused on that? Is there a way you measure it versus say anything else? Maybe my question didn't make sense. Where does
Are you
sustainability?
asking
Yes.
Brad? Yeah. Are
What's
you
that?
asking me? Are you asking me or
I was asking. I was staying with you on that one.
okay?
Sorry.
Okay, sorry. I would say not today.
Right.
We're working towards that. We are continually pushed by we do a lot of private label business, and so customer needs are coming up more and more on that, and it's very difficult because we're so big, right?
Yeah.
To like I've been to conferences for some of our private label customers, and some of them have a vendor that is 100% for that customer, right? They run
Uh,
right, all they run is that customer, right? And so it's much easier for a customer to influence decisions
mm,
like this for that vendor, because they wouldn't be in business without that customer. Or for
yeah.
us, even really big customers are a very small portion of our overall. And so we don't have that same leverage to use, just because the customer wants us to do something.
Got
It's
it.
just it's a different ball field, right?
Yeah.
And so I would say it's not integral to decisions around capital decisions today, but things like that council that I was
Hmm.
referencing, grants available that are geared towards sustainable decisions will help that.
Mm,
I think we'll lose that a little bit, I think, in this administration, and not to bring politics into it,
No.
but I think a lot of the grants in the next few years will be more manufacturing centric over sustainability centric.
Yep.
But again, we need to find what those are and then frame them to help the plants, because any money we can bring them, it'll help the decisions on making these kinds of choices.
Yeah, that's a great analysis there in terms of like there the lever moves and we just have to understand how it impacts the entire thing. Like sustainability, it can bring value, obviously, lowers your energy cost. Okay, fantastic. That's a big part of business, right? So where is the lever being placed, and then how does pulling it make an impact, and where can we then deploy technology to make that impact?
Exactly.
For sure, for sure. And Brad, when it comes to your clients, how do you help them? They're like, how do I justify this? What do you guys do? You talked about the spreadsheets and trying to put it forward. Is there anything else that you're doing to help justify sustainability for them or quantifying it in a way that they can put it into their evaluation criteria?
Yeah, we typically stick with the unit cost or the unit savings, whether it's
Yeah.
water, whether it's BTU an hour. We don't typically get into the carbon calculation that goes along with that. They do that on
Hmm.
their end, and we don't typically get into doing full blown ROIs for them. We give them the tools and the data to say, here's your savings, and then go make that business case because every organization is a little different, right? Of if they want a 2 year, a 3 year, what their threshold is. Back to the question you asked, Jen, I mean, I don't see it impacting sustainability on itself. A lot of organizations we work with that maybe the ROI gets a little bit worse, extends 6 months if it checks that sustainability box. But most things, unless you're saving headcount and labor, most things that have that ROI are also impacting sustainability in some way, shape, or form. Now, if it's a company that's put out goals for 2030, that here's our sustainability targets, they may say, hey, we need in this aspect, we need a sustainability project. Maybe they open that ROI window up even a little more, but at the end of the day, it typically comes down to still needing to fit within that ROI. But how we help them, I mean, let me use a pump seal example, and this is kind of
Okay.
exciting. The process engineer in
Pump
me
seals, yay! Exciting.
going to come out right. Exactly. And it may need to be using 1 gallon a minute of water,
Yeah.
right? And I've worked in manufacturing facilities where, the throttle valve, the needle valve wasn't set properly, and it's just running, say, maybe 6 gallons a minute of water through a 1 inch line.
Mm,
And this is where the scaling comes into play because if you run that math of, okay, there's a 5 gallon a minute difference, and maybe that pump runs 60% of the week, um, that's almost 40,000 gallons a week, and it's almost 2 million gallons a year on one pump if it's running 60% of the time in
yeah.
one facility. And so when you
One
start doing
pump.
that math, you can start seeing eyes open that it doesn't take much. I mean, so say even that was running 2 gallons a minute versus 1 gallon a minute. Okay, then maybe you're only saving 2 or 300,000 gallons a year on the pump, but it could be one pump in a facility with 50 pumps that are all running the same way, or maybe half of them have that issue. So again, that comes back to the simple math, but it scales tremendously. And I've worked in organizations that do sustainability audits and do things like that, pull people together for a 2 or 3 day conference, and you really see eyes opening when you start putting that to it. So whether it's a pump, whether it's CIP, we've talked about it, really doesn't matter where in the manufacturing process you're moving that needle, but if you find it and you scale that, it usually surprises people. So
No, that's a great piece of information there. And again, I think you're kind of highlighting some stuff here around the importance of working with partners, right? And to help you understand that.
yeah,
Because again, every facility is going to be different, but they don't typically have someone that's going to fully understand the scope of that stuff because they're so busy. You're trying to keep a plant running.
yeah.
Jennifer, I think you can probably attest to that. And finding
Jennifer
people that can
mentioned
help you move
earlier
that
the
needle.
good data, and that comes into play
Yeah.
so much with this, especially where we may make a site visit for 4 hours or a day, or maybe
Yep.
visit 2 times over the course of a couple of weeks to a facility, and you got to trust the people that are there running it every day. Some plants do have data historians and data at their fingertips, and you can really dive into that. But a lot of it too is, how often does this happen? And you're asking the maintenance guy, you're asking the operator, and it is hard for Rotom to digest that in such a short amount of time. You really have to, it comes down to organizations who are living that day after day after day to making sure they really know what's going on under their roof. when maybe the data isn't there to use. So
Mhm.
Yeah,
Yeah, that's a
for
good
sure.
point. And there's also a progression, I think. Well, I know because I've been living it, but when you start reporting data, it may not be clean data at first, right? And so there's this progression of, okay, get everyone reporting, and now let's make sure it's, the best data that we can get from them. And then at some point, you have to begin using that data to, one, tell the story that it's giving you, and then make decisions from that data, right? And so you don't just start doing that from the beginning because your data is not good enough yet, right? And you're still learning about what you're seeing and do we have the right things? And across 82 sites, we've got a lot of different kinds of people reporting the data, and so it takes some work to get the data in a place where you can start, one, seeing what the story is, and two, using it to make those decisions. And we're still in that journey. Our new council this year will, help use that data and guide it, but getting people in place where we can, see what that story means, and then use that to guide us is really, I think, a really important thing. And that's been my mission since starting in this role, because we weren't there yet when I started.
and I've
Yeah.
been there at plants where people, you first come up with some numbers and you start looking at it and you're afraid to share, right? Because it's too early
Yep,
in the cycle. So you're
Yep.
100% right with that is, and I mean, you do want to share because you want more people aware. You want other plants seeing, sister plants or plants running similar processes to know that this might be something to look at. But yeah, you're afraid to share that raw data or share that infant data, if you will, before you really understand it.
Brad, it's you're speaking my language there. It's like the walkthroughs I do at a facility. It's like, okay, I'm making a lot of assumptions here based on what I kind of know, right? Here's what it looks like. But big asterisk on that. We have to validate things, but you got to start somewhere. You have to
Yeah.
start the conversation. That's the whole point, right?
It's a big gray circle that hopefully as you trust that
Gets
data more and more
smaller
you get down, but it's like see if the circle's on the right end of the spectrum for to explore more and to dig into.
for sure. Okay, before we wrap up here, I'm respect. There's a question here in the chat. I'm going to ask you guys. See what we can do to answer it here. How important is energy efficiency in food production? We hear a lot about increasing energy costs, but are plants really investing in improving energy at the plant machine level? Have you seen instances using IoT, Internet of Things? Is that right? Internet of Things or equipment data for this?
Um, so in our plants, we certainly look to increase energy efficiency. But like I mentioned, there's only so much capital across 82 sites, right? And all of those decisions are based on ROI. So when things get replaced, a boiler as an example, they're certainly looking at the most energy efficient option that they can do for that. The problem is boilers can last 50 years, right?
Right.
And so you're not going to get a plant to replace a boiler unless they need to replace a boiler. And so, as new equipment comes in, there's some new product lines coming in, right? As those happen, they're certainly looking at the most energy efficient options that they can get. But I would say in most manufacturing, people are not going out to replace old equipment with more energy efficient equipment just because.
Hmm.
It's just not economically feasible usually. Now, in
Right.
some cases, may not be the case, right? We may be able to justify something, but in most cases, it's new equipment. We're not doing a lot of greenfields right now. We do mostly brownfield work, and we would look for the most energy efficient thing we can find. Operating costs are absolutely important.
Yeah. Brad?
Yeah, I would agree. Absolutely important. And I agree with most of what Jennifer said, but yes, you do see times where equipment data is used to make sure you want to be prepared and you want to know what technology is out there so that when that time comes, because like Jennifer was saying, you're not just going to go replace it to replace it, but maybe you're at a plant that is having compressed air issues and you need to put in another compressor or a boiler, as she said. And when you do that, put in a unit that's far more efficient than the one that's been running for 20 years. And then if
Mhm.
you're cycling through those, run the newer equipment that you have. That if you one is redundant or one only needs to run half the time, making sure you're operating those pieces of those utility generating equipment in a way that makes sense. Don't operate the old one just because you always have. Try to operate the new one 95% of the time and use the old one to turn on and turn off when you need it in times of consumption. So, um, yeah.
Yeah, good stuff. Yeah, I mean, my experience around it has been part of it depends on scale, right? How big is this project? If I found if I go in and can point out a project that is a low cost, high return, it may go on a list and maybe done even under some maintenance budgets, right? Depending on how big the project is. It's really about going back to all the things here. How do you validate and quantify the impact something can have? And honestly, sometimes working with an outside expert can say, look, because you don't realize, oh, it's just saving water. Well, it's saving water, chemicals, time, all these things. How do you bring it all together and tell the whole story? Getting back to the whole point of this, we're talking about storytelling. Working with people that can help you tell that story can make a big difference and can lead to real value. Um, in terms of the Internet of Things question here, condition monitoring of your equipment, understanding what's happening to a piece of equipment. Is it running efficiently? Are the bearings going bad and you're running and wasting money and energy? Adding things that help you understand and give you better data are things that I've seen that help a lot as well. Another question popped in here. I'll ask it super fast here. What is the best, and for understanding here, what is the best avenue to connect with key individuals when you have technology validated that can save 90% water and wastewater in a dairy industry? Um, I mean, first of all, I'll answer a little bit. I think it's understanding who can help you and who are the trusted advisors, and then sharing your goals around what you're trying to do, and then seeing what they can bring to the table and help you validate. I mean, Jennifer, Brad, jump in on this one.
Yeah,
Yeah,
go ahead, Jen. Jennifer.
yeah, I was just going to say all of us get bombarded a lot with vendors wanting access.
Yep.
And so I've been working on, how do I best communicate that to my my counterparts in operations and engineering, and that's one thing we'll cover in the monthly council meetings is, okay, here's who I'm hearing from. Those guys also have a whole list of who they're hearing from, right? And so a lot of people will send me information about their company, and then I'll bring that to them, right?
Yeah.
Because I'm not in the plants every day. I'm not living it like they are. And so they're the only ones that can really answer it. But there's been a lot of vendors that have come to me with technology, lots of really interesting stuff, lots of stuff that's not quite commercialized yet. I think there's a lot of interesting technology coming, moss as an example, fungus as an example, that can do some really interesting things. But it doesn't mean, because we're not in the business of trying new things. We'll try things that are already vetted, honestly,
Right. You don't want
because
to
we
be
have,
the first. No, you don't want to be the first one. I get
yes,
it.
yes, yes.
Yeah. Brad, you wanted to jump in?
Yeah, I mean, I appreciate the end user being inundated with requests of all these people that can help you. It does almost work better at times when the end user knows specifically what they're looking for. In this case, water, wastewater. Find that partner, and you can go to the manufacturer. Alpha Laval or Rotom partners with a lot of other ones too. We try to stay up with those that have the latest technology, the most impactful. But if you reach out to Alpha, Alpha will get us involved if we need to be. If you reach out to Rotom, Rotom will look and bring in others as we need to. So I would just, say make that first contact with somebody that appears to know what they're talking about and have proven records. A lot of companies have success stories on their website of where they've implemented it into facilities. And whether it's email, whether it's on their website, reach out to them. And usually those companies will then get the ball rolling for you and help you out there.
Yeah, for sure. Okay. In closing, first of all, thank you to FPSA. I want to actually, I'll read the announcement stuff at the end here. I want to state, I think you said this earlier, Jennifer, around everyone's on a different journey and where you are on your sustainability journey. Um, Everyone's in a different spot. Some people are just now trying to figure out how do they turn this into value. Some people are well down the line. If you were starting out today with building kind of a sustainability program like you're doing, you've probably learned a lot. What are a couple things that you would recommend people do as their first moves?
Yeah, I mean, and figuring out where your data sources are and how you're going to manage that has to be number one. And then one B is figuring out how to get buy-in from your operations and engineering partners.
Yeah,
I think those two things have to be happening at the same time. We're so big that the data part has been, just a huge lift for us.
right.
But we're also big enough that I'm lucky to have an IT team that is, super supportive and helps build a really great platform for us to use. And so with Power BI and all of it. So that lift has been huge for us, but it will help us move the needle forward, with our operations team and really getting into lockstep with them.
Yeah. Any tips on getting buy-in from other stakeholders that are important?
Senior leadership is obviously got to be part of that conversation. I will say you want to be really clear with senior leadership on what it takes to actually meet a goal they've agreed to. So
Yeah.
there's a slide I use that shows kind of the 6 steps to becoming a carbon neutral manufacturing plant. And you
Yeah.
start with on-site resource conservation, and then you look at energy and water efficiency upgrades. Next is heat recovery and
Oh
transition to
yeah.
electric, right? Because you'd have to get rid of all the natural gas in order to reduce that huge scope one. And then from there, you have to reduce the dependency on the electricity grid, right? And so then you've got to put in renewables. And then that you'd clean up the rest of your carbon emissions with, REX or, something like that.
Yeah.
Like that's the path to get to a carbon neutral manufacturing plant. But your leadership needs to understand what that path looks like and
Mhm.
what their appetite is for some of those buckets, because some of those buckets aren't something that you can talk about in all plants, right? And so, I think it's only fair for people who are agreeing to something like some of these goals to understand what it actually takes to make that possible.
Yeah. Fantastic advice. I think uh, coming from an expert like yourself, it sounds like you've been on the journey for a while and you've got some great guidelines for folks. Brad, for you, if someone comes to you and wants to start somewhere to start to make impact or big impacts with the least amount of investment that they have, where would you guide them? What are some things you point them at?
Yeah, you're probably not going down the road for the latest and greatest technology and investing in new equipment when you do that. But the one thing I've been involved with personally that I love doing, and this was before my Rotom time,
Yeah,
is kind of a regional based sustainability slash energy audit. And you use,
yeah,
and again, it takes those labor resources in your plants that sustainability may be third or fourth or fifth down their list, but carve out 3 to 4 days, and it comes from a leadership and a management direction and support for that. And maybe you pull 20 or 30 individuals that are, environmental health and safety related operations, engineering, or technical resources. And you go into one plant, and maybe not everybody's from that plant. You might have 4 or 5 individuals from that plant, but then you've got 15 or 20 others coming together. And you do a quick session to kind of understand what you're looking for with respect to water, understand what you're looking for with respect to gas, what processes you have, and so you give them some simple tools and you say, go and learn. And they go
yep,
interview people. They start understanding those assumptions. And when we talked earlier about how bad that first data is, you're getting that first data over 3 days
yeah,
and they're kind of painting this picture and they're coming back and reporting out. Here's what we found in this department. Here's what we found on this piece of equipment. And, they're kind of ranking their ideas. And then yes, you leave that plant with a whole long to-do list but a lot of it is low-hanging fruit. It's,
it
shut the
is.
lights off is a corny phrase, but shut your scrubbers off when your processing equipment isn't running. Don't leave stuff running on Saturdays and Sundays if you're not producing. Some plants do run 24/7, so that's not an option, but you build that internal knowledge from the ground up, essentially. And then the people that visited from other plants that might have similar processes, maybe not as Jennifer talked about, there's a lot of different processes are running, but more often than not, you might have that in a few other plants and share those big opportunities with people. And maybe they don't run it that way. Maybe they've already got that covered, but other plants don't. But you build your internal knowledge so that people start thinking about things that way.
Yeah, I love that. I mean, one of my favorite things to do is to put boots on the ground and walk through a facility with the people that are working the process that are there, right? And you just start asking good questions. It's curiosity is the best tool a sustainability person can have, and start asking the questions to uncover what's behind all this impact, right? And you start to lay it out, and you start to quickly piece together little things you can do. Some of it's not doesn't cost a penny. It's just like, hey, tighten that valve up, you're running 6 gallons a
Yeah.
minute through that pump when you need a gallon, right? It's that kind of stuff. And then putting it into actionable items that you can tick off one by one. It's a sustainability is not a uh, 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 one and done effort. It's a team effort, right? And together you have to kind of work to move those things forward for sure. Well, both of you, I just want to thank you so much for this. It's been a fantastic conversation. I think everyone that's listening has got some really good ideas to chew on. I do want to make a couple of quick announcements. So before we wrap up, two FPSA webinars coming in the next couple of weeks on February 4th and February 11th. FPA will host a webinar focused on supplier collaboration and a second showcasing the Red Circle honors winners in a special edition of Ask Me Anything. You can find details and register on the FPSA event calendar and FPSA website. If you are a member, you can log on to their Connect, which is full of resources. Really, a membership in that will get you access to a lot of materials. Head to that resource library. You can find wonderful things like the Alpha Laval No Footprints podcast. Little shameless plug there. It's a sustainability podcast. Myself and my co-host Jason here at Alpha Laval do. We don't talk much about Alpha Laval. We bring in people like yourselves to talk about what you're doing to make sustainability real. So find all that wonderful stuff on the Connect page for FPSA. And then in closing, I just want to sincerely thank both of you for your time and insight. I know this isn't something that you plan to do in your day. This is extra. And so I thank you for that. And the ideas and advice that you've given us, I think will give some wonderful takeaways. And of course, thank you, FPSA, for this fantastic opportunity to help tell a story around building, a sustainability story for the processing industry. I really appreciate it. And if you want to reach out to any of us, I'm on LinkedIn a lot. It's Sheldon Young. You can reach me at Alpha Laval, sheldon.young at alphalaval.com, and feel free to connect. Any parting words from either of you?
No, same. I'm also on LinkedIn, and yeah, happy to connect with vendors. I am bringing vendors to our leadership team, and so yeah, love to connect. And thank you so much, Sheldon, for the
Yeah,
opportunity. It's been fun.
thank you.
I'll echo that and thanks, Sheldon. Appreciate it. It's been fun.
Thank you. All right.